This is the first time I've bought a house. I'm 28 years old and looking for a place to settle down. I started looking for a house 5 months before my lease ended on my current place. I found a place that seemed perfect to me, but it was quite far beyond my budget, so I had to pass it up and keep looking. I looked at many other places, and even thought I had found a good house until the same one appeared in my search again, this time with a drastically reduced price, putting it within my budget range. I scheduled a tour and eventually bought the house. I was thrilled. It felt like a huge step forward in my life. It's a 2-story house with a basement and a spacious yard surrounded by trees. The only tricky issue is that it's a 20-minute drive from most stores and shops. But since I work from home, I don't need to go out much anyway. The first few days, though, things got a little weird. While working in the living room one day, I heard some noises coming from the basement, things being moved or dragged across the floor. I got up and opened the basement door, but the noise stopped. It was silent. I turned on the light and went down a few steps, but there was nothing there. I only had a few boxes in the basement, so everything was empty except for the water heater and AC unit in the far corner. I chalked it up to just being new to the place. I'm not used to the noises a house makes, and there was nothing in the basement anyway. But then, a day later, I heard it again. This time, it sounded like a slow thud of wood, perhaps a piece of wood hitting against the wall. I went down the basement stairs again, checking the perimeter around the walls, but once again the basement was empty. I couldn't shake the feeling, though. Maybe I just didn't believe in paranormal things, so logically, it must be the house settling in. I've experienced these sounds maybe 6 or 7 times now. By the 4th or 5th time, I stopped checking and started ignoring it until I was exploring the outside of my house. I noticed one of the upper window covers for the basement was missing from the side of my house. It wasn't alarming, just something I needed to fix before rain flooded my basement. I went out and got the cover from my hardware storage and installed it that day. That night, I went to bed early, but woke up at 11 p.m. because of the sound of wood thudding again from the basement directly beneath me. A moment later, I heard something else. This time very clearly. Footsteps from one side of the basement to the other. I was terrified. Part of me was convinced there was someone in my basement, but another part of me thought it might be something I imagined, or even another noise from the house that I needed to ascertain for sure. So I grabbed the bat I kept in my room and went downstairs towards the basement door. Just as I was about to approach it, despite the loud thud from outside the house, I paused, waiting for another sound. Then, I opened the basement door and walked slowly. There was nothing there. The same empty basement. I looked around and even waited for a few minutes to hear the sound again, but just like the other times when I went to investigate, as soon as I opened the basement door and looked around, everything fell silent. I felt very uncomfortable after a few minutes and went back upstairs. I placed a chair in front of the basement door so that if there was someone down there, at least I would be alerted if they tried to open the door the next morning. I checked the basement again, but something felt different, brighter than usual. I checked the window thoroughly and could see from below that the upper cover was missing again. I went outside and searched everywhere to find it, but it was completely gone. That was enough for me to call the police, although something was happening. They sent an officer who took notes from me and then searched around the basement. He found the same as I did. I got a new cover for the well and hired someone to come out and install bars on the windows from the inside. After that, I never experienced any more sounds or noises. I don't know what I was really dealing with in my basement. Maybe someone was squatting there, or perhaps it was something else. But even 3 years later, I still have the fear in the back of my mind of hearing those sounds again. My lease agreement is about to end, and the homeowners have decided they want to sell the house after this lease. So I'm forced to find a new one instead of renewing the lease as I planned. Which is unfortunate because they only gave me a 1-month notice, which isn't a long time to find a new house. I work full-time, which only makes the situation harder. The first 2 weeks passed, and I only have 2 weeks left to find a place and move. I'm stressed because time is running out. I only applied to 3 nearby houses without visiting them. 2 of them rejected me, but I was accepted in the 3rd house, which didn't look as good as the one I lived in, but I did the best I could with the bad situation given to me. I rented a U-Haul and packed my belongings as quickly as possible, putting all the boxes in and all the furniture in place. Eventually, I got a chance to see the house, and it was much worse than the pictures I had shown. The wall paint was peeling, and everything looked old and outdated. The rent was cheap, but not enough to redeem the trash condition of the place. I was too tired to deal with anything, but soon I set up my bed and fell asleep for a while. I slept longer than I wanted and woke up well-rested around 9 p.m. I checked my phone and got a message from the owner. He had just greeted me and told me to call him if I needed anything, but it was already late, so my angry call would have to wait until tomorrow. I closed my phone and went downstairs to make something to eat. Just as I turned into the kitchen, I jumped back. There was a man standing in the middle of the living room looking towards me. What I said softly, unsure of what to do, but it was really dark at that moment, and I couldn't read his face. He just stood there. "What are you doing here?" I said. The man turned around and walked out of the front door without any hurry. My first instinct was to run and lock the door. Then I called the owner, but he didn't pick up. I looked out the window to see if he was still there, but it seemed like he was gone for good. Calling the police crossed my mind, but I was too confused with the whole interaction. I didn't even feel threatened, actually. I didn't see anyone outside for a while, so I left the window and sat on the couch. I hadn't set up the TV yet, so there was nothing else better to do than start unpacking. I went through 4 boxes and was working on the 5th one when someone knocked on the door. I walked cautiously and turned on the porch light, then called out asking who's there. It took a long time before they answered. "It's your landlord," they said. I opened the door a bit and looked at them. They looked very similar to the man I just saw in my house, but I wasn't sure. "Hey, do you need something? I'm just here to make sure you settle in well," they said, smiling widely, leaning their hand on the door. "Yeah, I was just about to go to bed." "I'll talk to you tomorrow," I said, pushing the door, but the man outside kept holding the door and wouldn't let me close it. I stopped pushing for a moment, and the man smiled again. Then I immediately felt fear and dread. I threw my body against the door and closed it too quickly for him to react, turning the boat key. I heard the door handle turn, and the man outside bumped it. There was another long wait before the man ran away from the porch. I called the police and grabbed my car keys, putting them in my pocket to get ready to leave soon, running if necessary. I waited a few more minutes still standing near the front door before I heard leaves rustling around their house. I went to the back door and stopped. I walked a bit and peeked around the corner, and right in front of the back door of their house was the same man standing outside with a hammer in his hand. I took this opportunity to run to my car. I opened the front door and ran to my car in the driveway. I got in and locked the door, then reversed. I saw the man beside their house watching me. As I left, a man was gone. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough investigation and stayed. I met the owner directly. He wasn't the man I saw at my door, but strangely, he looked very similar. He even spoke in a very similar way. It made me wonder if he had a brother or something I didn't know about. It could also be a creepy neighbor or a homeless person. I never met that man again, but as soon as my lease was up, I moved and never looked back. My friend, whom I'll call Alex for privacy, and I decided to rent a house together. We discussed being roommates for a while because neither of us wanted to live with our parents again. We were both attending community college and had jobs, so it felt like moving out was just the next step. We found a very small but still decent house that was only a 10-minute drive to school. This was last year when COVID was still rampant, so we could schedule self-guided tours and see it for ourselves. Both of us thought it was the perfect kind of rundown but cheap house for us to spend our college years in. It even had a decent yard and wasn't crowded with neighbors around. One thing that caught our attention was the old creepy shed in the backyard. I mean, it looked like just an ordinary shed, but it had a padlock on it, and it wasn't mentioned anywhere in the online house description. Neither of us cared to use it, so we ignored it and signed the contract. I was very excited, and I could tell Alex was too. A month later, we moved in. The first week was truly amazing. It was the first time both of us were living on our own, so the freedom was incredible. On a normal Saturday night, I was in the living room watching TV, waiting for Alex to come home from work. It was only around 7, and Alex usually got off around 8, judging by the TV playback. Then, I heard what I swear was a loud closing door coming from outside, and my first thought was the shed. It was totally unlikely, but I decided to go out and check it for myself when Alex got back. I told him what I heard, and he asked me repeatedly if I was sure it wasn't from the TV or something, but I knew it wasn't okay. Let's see then. So we grabbed our phone flashlights and went outside. We were probably 20 feet from the front of the shed, and everything looked exactly as it was before. The key was still there up front, so it was impossible for someone to have gone inside and locked it from the outside. Alex stared at me as if I were crazy. We went back inside and watched TV for a bit. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had heard, though. Although at one point, while watching TV, I glanced to my side, and there was a figure standing outside the window, looking towards us. Alex didn't see it, but he heard the footsteps running away, so we were both outside this time. Alex asked what we should do, and I didn't know. We'd never faced anything like this before. I wasn't sure if the person had anything to do with the sound I heard earlier, but we remained vigilant. For a few hours, and without any other odd sightings, we went to bed. It took me a while to fall asleep, but I think I finally did around 10 p.m. I woke up in the middle of the night to a bright red light flickering on my bedroom wall through the window crack. As I became more awake, I realized I was hearing something, two soft rustling sounds also coming from outside. I was still groggy, and my head wasn't fully awake yet. But then I heard Alex calling my name from the hallway outside my room. "Hey, wake up!" As I was about to ask what was happening, I was interrupted by something unfamiliar and frightening. Music. I turned to the window, pulling back the curtain, and saw the shed engulfed in flames, just collapsed. The large fire was getting closer to the house. We called 911 and both jumped into Alex's car and drove across the street. The firefighters managed to put out the fire before it got too serious. There were only minor burns on the house side. We told the police about what we heard and the guy. I thought maybe he did this, but there was nothing to be done. Everything inside the shed was just ash, except for some old metal tools. It got me thinking that someone was doing something in there and maybe burned it down to hide evidence of their actions. As soon as we moved into it, everything seemed like too much of a coincidence. I guess we'll never know what really happened that night or what was going on inside that shed.